Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and obviously, as you can see here, we are getting back onto our Down the Rabbit Hole series. Before we do, as usual, folks, the disclaimers and the trigger warnings. Thankfully, on these, the disclaimers are relatively short. So, within our Down the Rabbit Hole series covering the anti-vax movement, you're going to see all the links to everything that we go through as we go throughout this series right there in the description box, with hopefully some helpful labels right above them so that if you see something that you'd like, you click on it and see what it's all about. Trigger warnings. We do have this channel marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity on occasion, and we do cover some pretty hefty and dark subjects such as Tobin World, the Judge Rootberg Educational Center, Agape Boarding School, and Circle of Hope. So if you have children that are 16 and younger and they are watching the content on this channel, I do absolutely recommend parental supervision, alright? Okay, also, for those new to the channel, yes, this is very much amateur hour. I am still relatively new to the YouTube platform. I do not know how to edit anything to save my soul. And considering that our current administration seems to pick a new area each week, a new program vital to people with developmental disabilities and other disabilities to pick on and to cut funding from, I haven't really had the time to be able to go ahead and learn. So, we do not have all the bells and whistles as the other channels. We don't have any fancy headings or sound effects or anything of that nature. But what I do guarantee is our content is good, and it always comes with packing receipts. But still, I do apologize about that ahead of time. Also, trigger warning. If you are MAGA, if you are Democrats, I come down on both sides. I am not on either side because none of them are on our side. And I am very much heavily critical of both sides. And more than likely, I am going to offend you. If you would rather avoid that, I certainly don't blame you. I've avoided my share of things that I really didn't need to stick my nose into or it was going to go south. It's alright if you want to stop this video, but I still recommend you go into the description box and take a look at the links. That way you can still be up to date as to what's going on, what's going to get cut, who it's going to impact, and how it's going to impact, because this is actually vital information right now. Even for those of us who are doing okay, we have family members that this is definitely going to affect. So please still go ahead and get a look at those. Alright, now we're going back to where we left off last week. Remember, we are going through the information provided by the investigative journalist by the name of Brian Deere, who was able to actually investigate in detail the original study that Dr. Andrew Wakefield put in the Lancet to show how misconstrued and how falsified the data of that small clinical study actually was. The reason why this is important is everything in regards to the criticisms of the MMR all start in one place. It all goes back to Andrew Wakefield. So we are going to be staying on him in the Down the Rabbit Hole series for a minute. Let's get to the lawsuit test case. But Mr. 11 was not the first parent with a child in the study whom I interviewed during my inquiries. Remember, this is Mr. Brian Deere talking here. That was Miss 2, the first of the two parents to approach Wakefield. She was sent to him by an anti-vaccine campaign called Jabs. Her son had regressive autism. Allow me to say it again. There is no diagnosis within the DSM-3, 4, or 5 that goes by regressive autism. All diagnoses with autism involved fall under, literally, the autism spectrum disorders. Now, there's a little bit of detailing in regards to where each person may fall on the spectrum, although most of us still argue because functionality fluctuates. Like me, today. I'm staying away from heavy machinery. Even the dishwasher, because this is my special autistic fog brain day. And trying to do anything more complicated than removing a remote control or speaking is probably not going to end well. So, there's also that as well. I just like to mention it because the main people that use that terminology, regressive autism, are grifters, pseudoscience true believers, and those like me who may use the term sarcastically within a context of explaining a whole bunch of things. Okay? It is not actual medical terminology that is used within anywhere inside the medical field. It's just like how the Judge Rothberg Educational Center horribly misuses the terminology of positive behavior supports, which is an umbrella term that fits a bunch of different programs underneath it. And it just kind of gets on my last nerve. Sorry about that. Let me get back to where we were. Long-standing problems with diarrhea, and was the prime example of the purported bowel and brain syndrome, still unsubstantiated 14 years later. I do want to make a note from my own history. I have had stomach issues for as far back in time as I can remember. I still have them today. I've had acid reflux diagnosed since about around middle school. And then finally I was able to start getting some medication, so I didn't have to keep calling my mom from school because I felt like my stomach was trying to burn me from the inside out. What I have come to understand is in regards to stomachs, it's not so much bowel disease as much as it is the anxiety that comes from being forced to navigate a world that is not built with us in mind, and a world that refuses to meet us halfway is going to cause anxiety. Anxiety is a contributing factor, a major one, with nervous stomach issues. For example, things such as acute gastritis, or in my case, with very early onset acid reflux. Now, there may be folks who share my diagnosis that do have bowel issues, but the point still stands. Because stress, where your mental health state is, it's going to directly affect any diagnoses you may have. So if you already have bowel issues, more than likely they're going to be exacerbated if you also have anxiety issues. And to my knowledge, a good majority of us do. Not quite as severe as mine, but pretty much all of us do. I just like to make this comment because this brain and gut thing has been the ideal that has launched a billion snake oil salesmen. So I like to kind of set things straight, right? Okay, let me go ahead and move on. This boy would appear in countless media reports and was one of the 4 best cases in Barr's lawsuit. I traveled to the family home, 80 miles northeast of London, to hear about child 2 from his mother. That was in September of 2003, when the lawsuit fell apart after counsel representing 1,500 families said, on the evidence, Barr's autism claims would fail. By that time, Ms. 2 had seen her son's medical records and expert reports written for her case at trial. Her concerns about MMR have been noted by her general practitioner when her son was 6 years old, but she told me the boy's troubles began after his vaccination, which he received at 15 months. He'd scream all night, and he started headbanging, which he had never done before, she explained. And Brian Deere asks, when did that begin, do you think? That began after a couple of months, a few months afterward, but it was concerning me enough. I remember going back. Brian Deere, sorry, I don't want to be massively pernickety, but was it a few months or a couple of months? It was more like a few months because he got this kind of, slide down. He wasn't right before he started. Not quicker than 2 months, but not longer than how many months? What are we talking about here? From memory, about 6 months, I think. Folks, we need to be seriously thinking about this here. And we need to start giving parents some actual realistic expectations. What I mean by that is this weird idea. They talk about regressive autism, right? Okay. Think about the age when they're going in to get that shot. That is a general age period where brain development begins to supercharge. All the milestones before then are the same milestones that pretty much every newborn child hits. It's around age 1.5, 2 that the expectations in regards to a child hitting their proper milestones begins to change. That's also a time period that as you expect it to change, and it doesn't, you see where I'm going there, right? We need to start talking realistically when we're talking about milestones here. Because nobody is hypersocial at 2 years old. Okay? I mean, granted, some might be a little bit more friendly with strangers than others, but by and large, most of us, when confronted with new people, tend to run and hide behind our mom or dad's legs, or the babysitter, in my case, my big brother. You see what I'm saying, right? What is this weird expectation in regards to 2 years old? Well, we're suddenly feeling like they're regressing, they're not as social. Exactly how social is a 2-year-old supposed to be? That is my question. am I aware of the fact that about around age 2 is when you start becoming more assimilated, learning to communicate with other individuals outside of the home? Yes, I'm aware of this. But I also know before that time period, that is not something that anyone is pushing. So, if you're not looking for that to happen within the first year, year and a half to 2 years of life, why is that considered regressive if it's something that they had never done previously? Now, this is just my opinion. I am not a doctor and I do not have a doctor's license whatsoever. But in my opinion, what's actually happening is at the age of 2 is when you begin to start noticing things that you're not going to be able to have the ability to notice with the child at the younger ages. That's when you begin to see the issues, because now there's new milestones about being more social, being more willing to learn how to talk and engage and be around others. Those type of expectations that were not there before because they were too young. You're noticing it because the expected learning how to navigate and properly socialize in this neurotypical world starts about around that age frame. The reason why it's glaring at a lot of these parents is because with us, yes, even with me, it's not there, right? So that's not necessarily regression. Hence why we generally use terms such as developmental delays, developmental disorder. It's not so much a regression as it is a delay. And what that delay looks like regards to 2-year-olds who are autistic changes from person to person. For example, I hid a lot behind my mom and my brother, and when learning how to speak, I did so in monotone, or as my aunt said, like echoing back words I was hearing around me in monotone like I was a little parrot. Okay? I mention that because developmental delay and regression are not the same thing. And I think that's one of the big major points of confusion here. And it's that type of confusion that people like Andrew Wakefield prey upon. Let me go ahead and continue here. All right. The next day, she complained to my editors. She said my method seemed more akin to the gutter press, but I was perplexed by her story, since there was no case in the Lancet that matched her careful account. According to the paper, Child 2 had his first behavioral symptom 2 weeks, not 6 months, after MMR. So here's some of the inconsistencies with the data when compared to the follow-up with the parents of the kids that were a part of that study afterwards. Looking familiar? This was derived from a royal-free history, citing headbanging and screaming as the start, taken by Mark Berlowitz, a child psychiatrist and a co-author of the paper. He saw Miss 2 during the boy's admission at age 8, after she had discussed her son's story with Wakefield. As I later discovered, each family in the project was involved in such discussions before they saw the hospital's clinicians. Wakefield found them at home and must have at least suggestively questioned them, potentially impacting on later history taking. But I knew little of such things then, and shared my confusion with Walker Smith, who I met shortly after Miss Two. There is no case in the paper that is consistent with the case history Miss Two has given me, I told him. There just isn't one. Well, that could be true, the former professor of pediatric gastroenterology replied disarmingly. He knew the case well, having admitted the boy for the project and written reports for Barr, who paid him 23,000 euros, or pounds, sorry. I am not so good on European currency, although with the way America's going lately, I better start learning, I guess. Well, so either what she is telling me is not accurate, or the paper's not accurate. Well, I can't really comment, he said. You really touch on an area which I don't think should be debated like this. And I think these parents are wrong to discuss such details, where you could be put in a position of having a lot of medical details and then try to match it with this, because it is a confidential matter. Sounds to me you don't like it when individuals fact check. You really don't like it when people begin to see very, very glaring discrepancies between the parents and their children who participated in the study and the data as it was reported later inside the Lancet. Now, why is that a bad thing? Isn't science about making sure that things are consistent? And also that should the same clinical study be able to be done again, that the individuals who do that study would be able to replicate the results. Why are we telling individuals you shouldn't be doing that? It's not fair. It's totally fair to start a scare against vaccines, which has been keeping us all safe for decades, nearly over 100 years for some of them. It's totally okay to scare everyone and have diseases that were almost nearly eradicated come back in to haunt us all. In particular, things like whooping cough and smallpox, those who are type of diseases that are notorious for wiping out full civilizations in history. Look it up sometime. That's okay. It's okay to fearmonger to the point that a whole bunch of parents decide that not vaccinate their kids because the autism is more scaries than apparently death. But if we want to know why there's such glaring inconsistencies between the accounts of the parents and children who participated in the study and the actual data as it was reported in the Lancet, we're the bad guys, and that just shouldn't be done. That is a blaring red flag with a sea of baby flags following after it like ducks and then circling the globe about 5 or 6 times. The regulators' main focus was whether the research was ethical. Mine was whether it was true. So as a 5-member disciplinary panel traveled through the records with 5 Queen's Counsel and 3 defendant doctors, I compared them with what was published in the journal. Alright, so we're going to get into some even more discrepancies we'll go ahead and make this relatively short today. There's still a few things I gotta do before the day closes out, because, I'll sleep when I'm dead, apparently. But it's quite clear what we're seeing here. These are very unscrupulous, grifting, evil. Y'all know what I'm going if you're familiar with me. Trying to make us the bad guys for wanting to know the full story, and then after speaking to the parents who participated, asking questions as to why it is not matching what was reported in the Lancet. And it's just like, well, I just don't think you should do that. That's just not fair. My perspective is, it is also not fair to put the world's population, the entirety of the world's public population, at risk due to some of the scariest diseases that haunt our dreams from the past. And to do so while not questioning you because your fee-fees will get hurt. What's unfair is putting the rest of us at risk because you want to prey off the desperation of confused and desperate parents. You are putting everyone else at risk with lies. But we're selfish for calling you out on it, to let the public know about it so we can stop this and people can start up the regular vaccines again before things get more out of control than what they already are. We know how some of these major diseases act when they have full control. History tells us what happens when we are unvaccinated and unprepared. If you hold that magnifying glass to this current generation, particularly with global and quick international travel, it is a terrifying picture and it's not looking good. What's not fair is putting all of us at risk at a possible pandemic someday that will make COVID look like just about around the neighborhood of the common cold. That's not me fear-mongering. That's me speaking to the stories we have from the past. That is what's not fair. And we're going to go ahead and close out on that one, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So if you could, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to utilize the comments. I do appreciate your time, and as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Before we head out, a little change to the series that I've been doing here on the weekends, just so you guys get a heads up as to how it's going to start shaping up through the week. So Thursday, we're going to have our videos out on Social Security and Supplemental Security income. Fridays, we're going to be doing the Down the Rabbit Hole series. Saturdays, we're going to be covering our Medicaid series. And on Sundays, we're going to start going ahead and covering the HUD situation and what we're looking at in regards to potential funding being cut from HUD, what the new regulations are as far as eligibility, and what that's going to look like moving forward. So, stay tuned, and we do hope you have a good one, folks. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye now.